am Sharon Norton, co-director for Europe and Africa for Mennonite Mission Network. And today with me, I have Matthew and Toni Krabill. They are coming to us from Paris, France, from the Paris Mennonite Center there. And they are in their first year of their first term. So they just arrived in December, right before COVID happened. Mm-hmm. And as many of you know, Europe was one of the first places after China that we found out, realized, experienced coronavirus. And so they have lived through a very unusual first year of the first term because of that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but also about their work and their ministry in Paris and beyond. So Matthew and Toni, if you could start just by giving us a little introduction to what the Paris Mennonite Center is.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Sharon. We're so happy to be able to be a part of this conversation with you. For the Paris Mennonite Center, North American Mennonites have been involved in ministry in Paris for over 65 years, working alongside Mennonites from France and other European countries in church planting efforts, theological education, other ministries. And the Paris Mennonite Center grew out of an earlier ministry to African students who were living in France. The ministry actually housed students. And out of these joint ministries, several congregations also came to existence in the Paris area, including the church that we attend, Châtenay-Marguerite, which is a diverse congregation on the outsides of Paris. And for the past 40 years, Neil and Jamie Blau, who are longtime MMN workers and directors, the current directors of the Paris Mennonite Center, they will be retiring very soon. Mm-hmm. They've taught in churches and in seminaries across France, Europe, Africa, equipping congregations and training new leaders. So for us, we hope to continue the work that they've been doing in working alongside churches and seminaries and developing Anabaptist theological resources and publications on peace, justice, and reconciliation. But we additionally hope to develop resources from an Anabaptist perspective on interfaith dialogue, Islam, immigration, Christian responses to refugees. And we're also looking forward to building relationships with African immigrant churches here in the greater Paris area, while also strengthening existing ties with French Mennonite congregations. Another big part of our work is working with the Francophone Mennonite Network. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, the Francophone Mennonite Network has been around for over 10, 15 years. And several years ago, they launched a center for the formation of justice and peace. And that is currently in progress and it's being launched. We're looking at piloting the first course in the next couple months on leadership, peace, and reconciliation. So we're excited about that, excited about building that out and seeing who will participate from Anabaptist Mennonite communities in Africa and Europe, as well as Canada, specifically Quebec. So
that will be a big part of our work in the next few years, and part of that will be, as Matthew said, developing resources for pastors, lay leaders, theology and missiology students throughout Africa, Caribbean, Europe, and North America.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. That is a lot of things to be involved in. And yeah, I always enjoy reading your Facebook posts and blogs and newsletters and things like that to hear about all the things that you are involved in and will be involved in. And I mean, first of all, the first thing, of course, when arriving in a new country, Matthew, you already had some French ability growing up as a missionary kid in West Africa. And Toni, you're a dedicated language learner now. So yeah, when you arrived in France, you were doing language study, and then the coronavirus came and there was lockdown. How did coronavirus impact you and your work in ministry and language learning?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, well, like for everyone around the world, right? It's been a strange, kind of bizarre time. We got here, and in January there were widespread transportation strikes, and so the metro system was shut down, and we couldn't really get anywhere. And then in February, part of our main role is actually to learn French, and we're at two different ends. She's starting, and I'm progressing. And so we had 1 month of in-person class. And then in March, then the president shut everything down for about 90 days. And actually, because the French classes went online, we were able to continue to do our French sort of as usual. Obviously, practicing and getting out and being able to do those things that are necessary was impossible. So that kind of threw a wrench into things. And also, we had just started to visit not only the Mennonite Church in Paris, Sharon Norton, but we were also visiting African immigrant congregations, and had just been into a couple. And then, of course, all that came to a halt. And so we've been doing the Zoom thing like everybody else. And in some ways, that gives great access to what's happening in those communities. And on the other hand, when you don't know anyone in those communities, you're not really able to build relationships. So those have been things that have been disruptive, as is the case, for lots of people around the world. We also, at the same time, have been following, even though we're in France, COVID has disproportionately affected communities, Black and Brown communities on both sides of the Atlantic. What's true in the U.S. is also true in France. Communities that are, of sub-Saharan African or North African descent are particularly struggling. And then you add to that the George Floyd death, and then the most recent stuff happening in Kenosha and everything in between. Those issues, obviously, both in America and in Europe, are different for historical reasons, but it also ignited a lot of protests and a lot of outrage here for similar issues, because communities that have been colonized and now live in France and feel oppressed and marginalized, those emotions are really raw. And the frustration is at a tipping point, a boiling point. And so that's been another thing that sort of happened within the whole COVID thing that has been on our hearts and minds as well. So those are a few thoughts about time. I mean, I think too, like within that, all that's happened, you do find yourself, it's pretty human to find yourself asking the question, like, why did God bring us to France during such a time as this? Right. When there's so much sort of rupture, disruption, and so forth. And we've often come back to passage in Jeremiah 29 about seeking the shalom of the city and being here, planting ourselves. And in some ways, regardless of whether we live in cities, towns, rural areas, that we're called to be faithful daily where we're at, despite the fact that there's frustrations and fears and hopes and different kinds of things that are all part of our existence every day. And so we've kind of used that as a compass for how we are living day to day and trying to figure out what God is trying to tell us to do and be here. So.